Bon dia, Portugang, to the buying. Nice to see you. This is the truth about poverty in Portugal. Let's check it out.
A's good, A's good, A's good, A's good. Wicked. It's Portuguese good.
All right, before we get started, I noticed that many of you who enjoy my content still haven't gotten around to subscribing. It costs you nothing to subscribe, but it really, really helps me out. So go ahead, smash that subscribe button. Go on, smash it. And if you don't,
that's ignorant.
All right, let's get into it. So, yeah, just a quick intro on this one. Portugal's minimum wage is low, and we all know it. Just let me find my mouse. I've made some notes here. But here's a question that most people never ask, and it's, does this low wage actually hide a parallel reality, one where many Portuguese households are in fact quite wealthy? And I've shown on the channel before, many very beautiful, luxurious houses. You just have to use your own eyes when you're walking around. Sure, we do see quite a lot of old banger cars everywhere, and but we also see quite a lot of new hybrid electric cars and German marks around. And people could say, yeah, they're on a lease, but they're still, I look at something like a hybrid Mercedes. And the lease is 700 or 800 euros a month, and I can't afford that. So, there's no point saying, oh, they're on a lease or it's a company car or whatever. The truth is still there. These are not people who are on 870 euros per month, obviously. Okay. The restaurants are full. People are wearing decent clothes. You know where I'm going with this. So let's explore the truth behind Portugal's income level. So there's a question of wealth distribution, what that means for the country's economic identity. And please stay with me in this video, because I know this is going to be frustrating for a lot of people. But what frustrates me is I hear people saying, oh, don't dare say anything about Portugal being cheap because everybody here is so poor. There's almost a weird assumption by people that the minimum wage is 870 euros. Therefore, that's everybody. And I even see people coming into my comments sometimes, especially Portuguese people, going, hey, the wage here is so low, 870 euros, It's almost like this 300 days of sunshine. People just can't let it go. And I always say to those people, are you on 870 euros? And they never answer me. Because the reality is this is nowhere near everybody, okay? Nowhere near everybody. Looking at these wages also gives us a completely distorted picture for other reasons, but let's get into it. So we'll start with the basics. As we know, 2025 Portugal's minimum wage is around 870 euros per month. That's the number you see in the headlines. That's the number politicians argue about, the number employers have to pay at minimum, and the number you'll hear expats and even Portuguese people bring up whenever we talk about the price of anything in Portugal. If you look at that number alone, you might assume most Portuguese people are poor. There's very little wealth in the country, and Portugal is a uniformly low income society. And that assumption is completely wrong. Wages are only one side of the picture anyway. The other side is wealth, of course, the accumulated assets households have from property, savings, inheritance, investments, and business ownership. When we look at wealth, Portugal becomes a very different country. And we can see that with our own eyes, just going, not just in the cities, go out to the villages, and you'll see lots and lots of posh houses. What would be posh houses anywhere else, right? So the surprising wealth of Portuguese households. Studies show that Portugal has a surprisingly high number of wealthy households, not necessarily high salaries, but high assets. And here's what the researchers found. The top 10% of Portuguese households own over half of all the wealth in the country. The number of Portuguese millionaires has been steadily increasing year after year. And a significant portion of Portuguese families own their own homes outright with no mortgage. Why that particular one is important? Take, for example, myself. I'm semi-retired, and I'm definitely living very, very frugally. And while if I'm going to be honest with you guys, things are quite tight at the moment. I can survive because I own my own home. Like when I was living in Nazaré, I was paying, I think, 800 euros per month in rent, and I just couldn't imagine doing that. Now I would literally be poor. So it makes a really big difference owning your home outright. Many families inherit property from older generations, and also to say, if you've owned your own home since you were in your 20s as well, this is another point. We're not just talking about people in their retirement or nearing retirement being homeowners. I'm talking about if you've never had to pay rent and you've never had to pay a mortgage. Okay, even if you're on a very low income, your situation is going to be quite different, isn't it? This is just simple math, guys. But a lot of people just don't think about it. So many families inherit properties from older generations, land, houses, apartments, which inflates net wealth without showing up in monthly salaries. So while wages may appear small, assets can be very large. A family might earn a modest income, but own 2 apartments, a plot of land, and a holiday home inherited from grandparents. And this creates a unique situation. Portugal is poor on paper, but large segments of society are sitting on substantial wealth. There's also side hustles. Like a lot of people do various side jobs in the villages. And anyway, you can understand it's not as simple as just looking at salary. Why this wealth is invisible. Just to clarify what I mean by that, for example, in Hong Kong, I was a teacher. I also did private tutorials on the side to boost my income. You know what I mean? We don't have to think very hard to understand the real situation, okay? Why this wealth why doesn't this wealth show up in everyday life or the public conversation? A few reasons. Wealth isn't discussed publicly. Portuguese culture is very private. You don't show off money. Well, not everyone shows off money. You don't brag. You don't flash wealth. It's a conservative, discreet society, generally speaking, okay? It's locked in property. People don't walk around with their net worth written on their foreheads. Land and houses don't show up in wage statistics. Many wealthy Portuguese rely on the low taxation of assets, okay? So low property taxes plus inherited homes equals high net worth without high income. The cost of living historically was low, so a modest salary could support a comfortable life, especially outside Lisbon and Porto. So the public debate focuses endlessly on wages while ignoring the huge wealth accumulated privately inside families. So the 2 Portugals, okay? So what we're really seeing here is the emergence of 2 Portugals. So the first Portugal is a country of workers earning like 900 to 1,200 euros per month, struggling with rising costs, especially housing. This Portugal feels the squeeze. These are the nurses, shop assistants, waiters, cleaners, factory workers, right? But I do want to add to that I don't care what anyone says. If I was a single guy living on my own, owning my own home, I could live here on 1,000 a month, not a problem, and I'd be comfortable. I wouldn't feel like I was struggling, anything like that. I would just feel comfortable. Okay, I know some people just can't handle it, but I would. The second Portugal, a country of families who own property, inherited land, and sometimes multiple real estate assets. They may not earn huge salaries, but their wealth is significant. The problem is that these 2 realities rarely collide in political discourse. One group pushes for higher wages. The other quietly maintains its financial comfort through accumulated assets. And because the second group is discreet, their wealth is almost invisible in everyday life. So outsiders and even many insiders imagine Portugal as a universally low-income country, but it's not accurate. Why it matters? It's crucial to understand this difference for several reasons. It changes how we interpret economic statistics. A low minimum wage doesn't automatically mean a poor country. It could affect the political debate. Policies that are based solely on income ignore the huge disparities in wealth. It can also help to explain Portugal's housing crisis. People with high assets can outbid younger generations with only wages. It reveals generational inequalities. Older generations accumulated wealth when property was cheap. Think like the boomers in England. Younger people today face higher prices and lower relative wages. And it really exposed why many locals feel Portugal is becoming expensive. The wealthy can continue to absorb rising costs. The wage-dependent Portugal cannot. When I say wage-dependent, I'm talking lower end of the economic scale, right? So, for example, factory workers and unskilled workers generally. And this tension is shaping modern Portugal socially, economically, and culturally. So I want to end by saying, yes, the low minimum wage in Portugal absolutely masks a deeper truth, one where many Portuguese families hold significant wealth, even while wages remain modest. The challenge for Portugal now is bridging that gap. But I do want to say that, assuming that all people in Portugal are on the minimum wage or they're all poor or they're all struggling is really no different to the other myth that says all expats are minted and have tons of money, right? That's also not true. There's many of us who are having to live frugally. We've made that choice, right? But we're living pretty frugally compared to maybe how we lived in our home countries, and we're making that decision. So we're, in a way, choosing to live like this. But the vast majority of us expats, and why I say expats is instead of immigrants, right? Everybody knows what I mean, and there's a kind of a politically correct nonsense that's trying to differentiate that, but I mean it because I think it's important to make the distinction that I'm talking about, generally speaking, richer immigrants. Okay, so like people who came here not to work, people who didn't come here to work, in the care homes, people who didn't come here to work in the factories, people who didn't come here to work on the fields. I'm talking about people who are like me, maybe semi-retired or heading towards retirement, who came with enough money to say buy a house, let's say, for example, and they're probably living on their pension. Okay, so I'm talking about those kind of people, if that makes sense. Okay. So not every expat is wealthy, and then probably the other kinds of immigrants I'm talking about who come here, economic migrants, they're going to be possibly on those minimum wages also. But I think it's important to really know what we are talking about before we start trying to dictate to others how to behave and tone police other people and all this sort of thing. But anyway, let me know in the comments what you think about this. Is this something you already knew about? Is it something that's frustrated you? Or is it something you completely disagree with? You just think, wow, you're just talking rubbish, geezer. Everybody here, even the, the CEO of Lidl is on 870 euros per month. Who knows? Who knows what people think? But you're free to let me know in the comments anyway. If you enjoy this type of content and you're new around here, please consider subscribing. It really, really helps me out. And if you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you get any value from my content, please consider buying me a coffee or my Buy Me a Coffee link down below. Or if you want to help me out commission free, you can put something in my virtual tip jar. And all of that lovely moolah goes directly into my pocket. Probably straight out of my pocket into my son's pockets, but we all know how that goes if we are parents. Muito obrigado, amigos. Até logo.